Oregon's finally got a commit. Just not the one some of you might be looking for.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin, and thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view if you're watching on YouTube every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. Tons to get to today. It was not a good weekend for one Oregon program. It was a bad weekend, as a matter of fact. Another program had a solid but not incredible. Yeah, we're going to talk about the postseason woes today here on the show a bit, and who's leading the defense or just the team overall this year. That's all in today's show, which is brought to you by our friends at Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. So, Oregon's gotten started in the class of 2027. That might not be the recruiting news plenty of you were looking for, because Mark Bowman, a five-star tight end, committed to USC. More on that in a moment. But Prince Tavazon, I hope I'm pronouncing that last name correctly, has verbally committed to the Ducks, which dropped late on Sunday night. Hence why my days are pretty free this time of year, because news rolls in at any time of day. But this is a pretty good start for the 2027 recruiting class. And this is how recruiting works. It's crazy, it's wild, but you got to do it this way or you're going to fall behind. One of the top players on the West Coast in the class of 2027. Does he stay committed to the Ducks? I tend to think yes, because statistically, most guys do. Do you know the name Tony Cumberland? You should. He's a class of 2026 commit for the Ducks, who has been committed for a very long time. Kind of a similar timeline, frankly, for Cumberland and when he committed to the Ducks. He's still committed to the Ducks. I've never heard anything to indicate that he's not. September 23rd, 2023, Tony Cumberland committed to Oregon. Still committed to Oregon all these years later. So, solid start to the class of 2027, but I know that many of you are looking for commits in the class of 2026. And this month of June is going to be huge. If Oregon's going to land a top 10 class, which is all they have ever done, by the way, since Dan Lanning and his staff took over in a full cycle, the 2022 class, when they took over, I'm not judging them on that. They got Josh Connerly. That's really all we need to remember from that high school recruiting cycle. But going forward in this class, yeah, I expect them to be in the top 10. That's my expectation every single year. If they're going to accomplish that, June has to be a good month. It doesn't mean that every single recruit has to commit in the month of June. Oregon does need to take some steps forward. They've got a bunch of visits lined up in the coming weeks. They're going after some big-time prospects, as you would expect. But for all of you who are just out there looking for a commit, hey, there you go. 2027 underway. But for 2026, one of the pieces of news that dropped over the weekend was there was kind of, according to those that cover recruiting very closely, there was a late surge from USC to get five-star tight end Mark Bowman from Modern Day High School, a place that Oregon has recruited a lot in the last several years. And then USC got a commitment from Mark Bowman, and he was tweeting about how they've got to keep the talent down there in Southern California and all that stuff. And USC adds another five-star to their number one recruiting class. So did I want Oregon to get Bowman? Yes, incredibly talented guy. Never expected it. If I'd gotten a mailbag question a couple weeks ago, hey, which five-star do you expect Oregon to get? I've talked about the number of five stars I expect Oregon to land in this cycle. Should be at least in the 3 to 4 range, maybe 5, but I bet 3 to 4 is where it ultimately winds up sitting. Bowman was never a guy that I had near the top of my list because Oregon already has a five-star tight end. And show me the recruiting class. I'm sure there's one out there somewhere. I don't really know where. But I don't know of a class off the top of my head that's got 2 five-star tight ends in it. Don't know where it is. I mean, it'd be unique. It'd be cool. But remember, Oregon's got Kendra Harrison committed. So positionally, this was not a big need for the Ducks in the class of 2026. I think where this cycle will really get built out is along the defensive line. They have a couple of guys committed. Tony Cumberland, who I mentioned, longtime Oregon Duck commit, and Viliami Mawala, who Brian Smith says is definitely underrated at his current ranking, thinks that he'll probably fly up a bit in the class as he plays out his senior season. And then they've got Dutch Horisk as well, who's a 3-star edge from St. John Bosco, which is also a premier high school down in Southern California for college football talent. But I think you're going to see that continue to be a position that Oregon emphasizes. They've been in the mix for a while for a couple of different guys along the defensive line. There are some other defensive prospects that I expect them to go after, but they went very heavy into the front four in the 2023 and 24 cycles. Then in 25, it was throttled back a little bit. 2025, the kind of storyline of the recruiting class was all about the defensive backs because it was the best DB haul that Oregon has had ever literally in the history of Oregon football. Last cycle is the best one that they've ever had. So I suspect up front you'll see a couple of big names start to work their way towards Oregon, just with the recruiting prowess that Dan Lanning and Tosh Lupoy and Tony Tuioti have demonstrated over the last several years, and just the way I think the priorities have cycled through. I wouldn't be surprised if, I just listed 3 defensive linemen. Wouldn't be surprised if they get to 6 or 7 in that sort of range. Certainly the offensive line's another position that I've talked about a lot because they, were after Jackson Cantwell. They were a finalist. He ends up choosing Miami. They are after Emmanuel Iheanacho, who's going to go through the visit cycle this summer before committing in early August. And again, this class is going to be defined in the next 2 months, mostly, not entirely. You can get some big names that commit in August or guys that flip during the season. Like Naeem Offord was a little bit later in the cycle, or Aiden Breland 2 years ago committed on the day of the Washington game. That was in October. And by the way, that's a guy who might see the field pretty considerably here in the class in this 2025 season. So overall, I think that Oregon not getting Mark Bowman, I don't view it as, oh my gosh, I can't believe they lost another one to USC. When they were going after, it was Lincoln Cure, and there was another 5-star tight end in the 2025 cycle that they were going after, and I never expected him to land both. Tight end's just not a spot where you're going to go out and land 2 5-stars at the same position. You can do that along the defensive line. You can do that in the secondary, as we saw last year, of course. But overall, do I think this is, oh my gosh, USC did it again? No, it's a great get for USC. Bowman is a Kenyon Sadiq, Brock Bowers type of football player, one who I'd love for Oregon to wind up with via the portal one day. Do I expect that? No, of course not. But I think recruiting is going to heat up. I really do. I think the month of June is going to be a fun time. So let's all be patient and then excited once names do roll in. And don't forget, the 2027 class is indeed underway. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hit me up on Twitter, all of that good stuff. So, who leads this Oregon team? Also, this last year's defense or 2019? Who are you taking? That is coming up next. First, this episode brought to you by Monarch Money. Do you ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is not just a budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and you actually start building wealth. All-in-one convenience is what they are all about. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to do a variety of things like check your finances, track your spending, even plan long-term goals. It's all over there with Monarch Money, so make sure you go and check them out today. If you haven't already, maybe some of you have, take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Pretty good deal. That's a pretty good deal. Check them out at monarchmoney.com. Alrighty then. Let's dive into the mailbag, because the mailbag's great. Because you send me thoughts, I put it on Spencer's scale of agreement, or you send me questions, and then I answer it here on the show. and we keep the content flowing together, you and me. So, this one came in from a Locked On Ducks insider. Did Oregon go light on 2026 NIL to get everyone back for a natty run? I wish. But as I mentioned earlier, please, let's not punt on 2026. It has started. Yes, it is not the start Oregon was looking for. No, there's a long way to go. Like, this would be the equivalent of watching a first quarter. Like, what's one that pops in my head? 2023 Washington State at home. Oregon end of the first quarter, I think, was down 10-3. They won the game by like 20 points. All right? Like, doesn't mean the first quarter isn't a significant data point. It is. It should have your attention. Punting on it? No. Let's shut all of that down. Another insider sent this one in. Who do you think the leaders will be for this year's squad? Do you have any behind-the-scenes insight on how Lanning and his staff cultivate that leadership year to year? On the second part, Dan Lanning doesn't let anything get out that he doesn't want to get out. I routinely, by routinely, I mean, a monthly basis or so when it pops in my head, such as moments like this, think about that time Chris Hudson, before the Utah game in 2022 when Bo Nix was hurt, just said in a press availability, we're going to need Ty to do that, something like that. And he just spoke as if Ty was going to be the starter. And then Chris Hudson wasn't on Oregon's team after being a good player. He wasn't on the team the next season. Tez Johnson was better, of course. But I think about that from time to time. Dan Lanning, and it's just the way that he was, it's the way that he was raised as a coach, so to speak, that he's very particular with what he wants to get out, what he's okay with being out there. Anyway, it's why I love the Ducks versus them, because it is a peek behind the curtain that allows us to see what it is like in the locker room, what it's like to be a player, what it's like to be a coach, what it's like to be in the arena like that, what it actually sounds, looks, and feels like. You don't get that sort of thing very often. So no, I don't have any unique behind-the-scenes insight on how Dan Lanning and his staff cultivate that year to year. I do know that each season, the leaders have been pretty clearly defined. Sometimes it's been obvious, and sometimes it's, guys have kind of emerged. But frankly, it's been, I think, more obvious to us on the outside looking in, and that's not a bad thing, because that means things are kind of progressing the way that you would expect. So I'll start on the defensive side of the ball. Bryce Boettcher is the leader of this defense. And, I guess this was kind of unexpected with, going into last season. I don't think I had Bryce Boettcher as one of the top two linebackers on Oregon's team. He absolutely was. We all knew Jeff Bossa was the number one guy. And a year ago, I know for a fact, because I do remember, sometimes I remember things, sometimes I don't, sometimes I do. Anyway, I know I said Jeff Bossa was one of the leaders on this team. That was the guy calling the defensive signals. He was going into his fourth year of being a Duck. He had played all 4 years, a significant role in the defense. Like, that made a lot of sense. Well, Bryce Boettcher now very clearly takes that mantle. And maybe Devin Jackson is the defensive play caller. I'd be stunned if it is not Bryce Boettcher, who just had, according to Pro Football Focus, the best linebacker season of anybody on the Ducks and should be in line to have a good one again. I don't know if he's a high-level NFL guy. If he were, maybe he would have come out, but he's certainly not hurting his chances to get drafted into the NFL. He's already been drafted, of course, in Major League Baseball by the Astros. I pray I never have to root against him one day, but I would. I cannot root for the Astros under any circumstance. Cannot root for the Astros as a Mariners fan. But defensively, Bryce Boettcher's got to be the guy, I think, that leads everybody. Elsewhere on that side of the ball, curious to see between Mateo and Dylan Thieneman who emerges more as kind of a vocal leader. I think it'd be Thieneman. I really do. Even though it's his first year as a Duck coming over from Purdue, Mateo very much, and his brother DJ was always like this too, very quiet kids. And obviously Mateo's a stud and is probably the best defensive player that Oregon has. I don't think that's a super hot take for a guy that just led the Big Ten in sacks and figures to do so again this year and then get drafted in the top 10. But hey, maybe they are saving up all the 2026 NIL to bring everybody back. I'd be here for it. Because that's kind of how I see the program anyway. But defensively, I think you'd have one of those two guys. Positionally, Thieneman makes more sense because it's just more communicative. But Mateo's going into his third year as a Duck, and that matters too. So I definitely put Bryce Boettcher number 1 and one of those guys in the number 2 spot. Offensively, I have heard that Dante Moore has got more leadership traits than it might appear. And all I mean by that is he's not incredibly verbal. He, like Mateo, kind of soft-spoken. He's not a big, look at me guy. He's not a big, come on, let's go, rat. Like, he's a Mariota style. And Mariota, absolutely a big leader on the Oregon teams that he was a part of, particularly his last 2 seasons when he had a year or 2 of experience under his belt. But I have heard that he, at practice, that guys look up to him, that guys respect, that he has the ability to kind of command that QB1 attention. And, he hasn't been named the starting quarterback, but that's an external question, not an internal one. They know who the starter's going to be. I suspect it'll be Dante Moore. So I think that's a guy. And then I'll throw this one at you, Evan Stewart. Evan Stewart is back for his 4th year of college football, his 2nd year with the Ducks. He did not have to return. And I think that sort of thing matters a lot when you're talking about the leaders on a football team. He could have gone to the NFL draft, and just because of, his size, he's not a super big guy, but his speed, explosion, hands, route running, all that stuff, he would have gotten drafted this past year. He could raise his draft stock. I think he's well suited to come back for a 4th season of college football. Definitely glad that he is for Oregon's sake. But I think that Stewart is a guy who, unfortunately got dinged up going into that Rose Bowl game and was just such a big part of the offense last year. Could very well be Oregon's leading receiver this year, or he could be 2nd or 3rd. That's how much talent is in that room. But Evan Stewart is a guy, and then Poncho, going into his 2nd year starting at center, and his 3rd year as a Duck playing a big role on the team. That'd be another guy who, as an outsider looking in, I'd highlight as those are probably the biggest leaders on the roster. So this one came in from Brandon. Spencer's scale of agreement question. Love a good SSA attachment here. The 2019 defense was better than any defense we've had under Lanning, especially the secondary. This is tough. This is tough. Now, the secondary, I agree. The 2019 secondary, probably the best one. Outside 2014 is really underrated. I don't know that they had the safety play that you have with Javon Holland in 2019, but you look around that 2019 secondary, Diamado Lenore has got his 2nd or 3rd contract in the NFL. I think it's his 2nd with the 49ers, got a big payday. Thomas Graham is on an NFL roster somewhere. That guy was a stud. Javon Holland, I think, is going to be Miami. No, I'm sorry. Holland is a New York Football Giant now. So, again, a guy who is worthy of getting a 2nd contract after being selected into the league. And then Verone McKinley, in the years to come, led the country in interceptions and was an All-American. So, yeah, that unit was pretty stacked. I agree. We haven't seen a secondary as good as that one. This group that is being cultivated by the staff right now could absolutely be better. Could be better. But the lineup of recruits is even deeper than those guys, who were all pretty much blue chip prospects. I don't think Verone McKinley was, but Holland was, Graham was, pretty sure Lenore was too. Like, those guys were solidly rated recruits that got developed really well. If this staff recruits this group of guys the way they recruited that unit, then yeah, you're going to see the best secondary, that one of the better secondaries Oregon has seen. And I hope they get there. But the 2019 defense being better than any defense, statistically, there is some merit to this. That 2019 defense did average more passing yards per game allowed than this past season, which may surprise you given the secondary. They gave up, 220 a game? This past year is only 185. I know that our lasting impression of the 2024 defense wasn't good. They were really good. Really good. So points per game this past year, just over 19. 2019 was just under 17. I think the caliber of competition faced in 2024 was significantly higher. However, the best individual player was on the 2019 defense. That's Kayvon Thibodeau. It's definitely, but this past year's unit, I really don't want to sell it short. So I am going to go with a 6. The reason, even though the stats support what you're talking about here, I go to the caliber of competition, and the opponents that Oregon played in 2019 was not quite the same. Both were really, really good, though. Better than any, even though the stats are there, I'm only at a 6. Still at a 6, right? I could phrase that different ways, like I'm at a 6, or I'm only at a 6. And it lands differently for you all out there. But yeah, I put a 6 on that. Solid level agreement, but not entirely, because this past year's defensive line, better. Not relying on one guy. Linebackers, better. 2019, I'll take the secondary to be sure. And the stats are really, really good. So keep sending in your takes, hot, cold, somewhere in between for Spencer's scale of agreement. I have got a scathing review for one particular umpiring crew. So I'm going to talk about softball tomorrow on the show. Their season came to an end getting to the final 5 of the Women's College World Series. Extend Melissa Lombardi now. Don't just go, make it happen. Talk about that tomorrow. So this was a flop for Oregon baseball. Sometimes I get comments from people, Spencer, why are you being so negative? I don't know. I watch Oregon in the postseason all the time. What do I have to be positive about? What positive spin do you want me to put? Softball season, complete success. Phenomenal year. Winning a game in Oklahoma City. Being competitive with the 4-time reigning champs in what is essentially a home game for them. Baseball, this is dud. This is a complete and total dud. Hosting a regional, Big Ten champions, and you end the season with 3 straight losses. Your best bats go cold at the wrong time. Jacob Walsh has more home runs than any player in the history of Oregon baseball. And in the postseason, particularly regionals and super regionals, guy just hasn't been good the last couple of years, which stinks because he's a great dude and he's an awesome player and he had an incredible career. But this was a flop. To lose game one to Utah Valley, champions of the Western Athletic Conference, and then lose game 2 to Cal Poly and blow a 3-run lead after the 6th inning. The bullpen regressed back to the problems it had. It looked like it had been fixed. Nope. Problems came right back up. This was the worst postseason showing in the last couple of years since I've talked about Oregon baseball's postseason runs here on the podcast. I mean, this is the worst one. Not just by the result, but the way the result transpired. So I first want to talk about game 1 against Utah Valley. Did not like the approach from Mark Wasikowski. I've seen this in high school and college baseball over the years. Bite coaches in the rear end where you're playing an opponent who you should beat. Oregon was minus 900 in the odds to beat Utah Valley, and they lost straight up on their home field. Fan support was great. I love seeing it. PK Park, the Jane for the regionals, super regionals. The fans have been there doing their part. And unfortunately, for Mark Wasikowski's team, when they get to PK Park, his teams have not been good in the regionals and super regionals. They have fallen short on several occasions. They were 2 outs away from Omaha a couple of years ago. It all unfolded. They're out of pitching for game 3, and Oral Roberts went to the College World Series instead. It has not been good. It's baseball. It's a weird game. This is a program, though, that was the preseason Big Ten favorites, the regular season, I think, co-champs with UCLA, that was returning most of their team from last year, that went to their 2nd straight super regional. For those that don't follow baseball super closely, here's the equivalent. Dana Altman goes to back-to-back Sweet 16s getting beyond the first weekend, back-to-back Sweet 16s, returns most of his team for the following season, and loses in the first round as a 3 seed to a 14 seed. That's what this was. This was just Oregon falling apart. And you know what? The thing that stinks to be an Oregon fan at the moment is if you ever come across fans in real life or online that, make jabs about Oregon coming up short in the postseason, what are you going to come back with? I mean, there's not a lot. You can't, be as down on what softball did. As I said, and I'll talk about them more tomorrow. But this was a massive disappointment. There were big expectations for this team. They showcased why. They certainly had some growing pains. I wasn't thinking this would necessarily be a team that, breaks through and gets to the College World Series. That wasn't always possible with the way they can swing the bat. But for them to go out and go 0-2 when they're hosting a regional and they did not even play a Power 5 school. Bad showing. And you know what? Baseball's like that sometimes. It stinks. Yeah, that's just with the way that averages work. The Rockies are going to be, in all likelihood, if they keep on this path, the worst team in the history of baseball. Last year, the White Sox were the worst team in the history of baseball. The White Sox won like 50 games. The Rockies will win like 40 games. The Rockies beat the Yankees. The Yankees are going to be the favorites in the American League when the regular season comes to a close. They lost the game to the Rockies. Baseball. Texas struggled. Vanderbilt, number 1 overall seed in baseball, hosting a regional. Lost. Wright State got Vanderbilt, a program that has won the national championship in the last 10 years. I forget the season. Might have been, I think, 2018 or so. The thing I did not like about Mark Wasikowski, I have not talked about the umpiring call yet. I know I teased you with it before the break. I'm going to get there, but Game 1, Utah Valley, WAC champs, Mark Wasikowski didn't throw Grayson Grinsell to save him for Game 2. Nope, don't like it. Don't like it for 2 reasons. Number 1, sends the wrong message to the other team, which is chip on the shoulder. They're sitting their ace against us because they don't think we're good enough. You put them in that mindset when they already have a we've got nothing to lose mentality, yeah, that can come back to bite you in the rear end. And it did. Then, I know he's the ace, but in Game 2, it's a lot different. When you're pitching with the season on the line, and Grinsell was not his dominant self. When you have got your ace, you roll him out. You roll him out Game 1. And if you have such a lack of confidence in your number 2 pitcher that you feel like you need to throw him against a weaker opponent, then guess what? You don't deserve to be in that position. But I don't feel that way about Oregon. They were the Big Ten regular season champs. They did sweep Oregon State in the regular season series 4-0. I know that team was better than what they put on the field. But the fact that decision got made, did not care for that at all. And in Game 1, would Oregon have won had the call not been made? Potentially. They would have at least been in extras since they lost the game by a run. And the bullpen would have kept throwing. So I can't guarantee you that they'd win the game. But I'm not ranting first and foremost. I know I did a little switcheroo on you guys, but I'm not ranting first and foremost about the atrocity of a blown call at home plate that was the malicious intent from Ansoneros, who gets suspended for the next game, who has to watch Oregon season. It was completely and utterly ridiculous. They overturned it. They called it a malicious slide. My understanding is that the umpiring crew was at the mercy of the replay officials for the NCAA. Whoever made that decision after 7 minutes of discussion should not have you do not belong in that spot. You just don't. Because if you actually watch the play, which wasn't initially called malicious intent, but then was ruled to have it, and it is a rule, malicious intent is in the rule book and can override a catcher blocking the plate, which he absolutely was. If you actually watch Ansoneros, he does try to slide, but you can't slide without feeling like you're going to pop your Achilles out of place when the catcher's blocking the plate like that. And Arrows tried to let up. There was a NAIA baseball clip or something that went around where a guy barreled straight through a catcher that was clearly malicious. He lowers the shoulder to look like Noah Whittington running over a safety at Autzen Stadium last year. Ansoneros tried to slide, but it's awkward. And then you see his hands go up. He's trying to brace himself and also slow his momentum so he doesn't hit the catcher. It is one of the worst calls I've ever seen. Here's the fact of the matter. It shouldn't have come down to that. You shouldn't have been in that spot. This is an SEC hypothetical take. If you put Grayson Grinsell out there against Utah Valley, who are not as good of a team as Cal Poly, who he struggled against, I don't think you're in that position at all. And so it was a misplay. I understand the strategy. I just don't like it. I never have. I never will. You throw your ace in game one. I don't care who you're playing. You go out there, you make sure you win the game. You figure it out from there. And if you're worried about it, guess what? You've got work to do in the offseason and build yourself a better pitching staff. So it was indeed everybody, it felt like. And I didn't see anyone that disagreed. Even Washington people. Jordan Reffett, who hates Oregon, is just like a total troll, even saw the clip and said, yeah, this is a terrible call. Like, this is an awful call. It's truly awful. That you're operating in that space, though, is representative of the fact that, now, that's not what held you back from making a run to the College World Series. You didn't show up in the postseason. You had a hand. You played it wrong. You played your cards wrong. And all you can do is go back to this is still a really good program. Hosting a regional after back-to-back super regionals, yeah, they're still in a really good place. But the postseason letdowns that Oregon fans are having to go through time and time again, I'm right there with you guys. Not great. It's not great. It's just, it feels like Oregon is cursed, and some team in a major sport's got to break through, whether that's basketball, football, baseball, softball. Someone's got to eventually, right? I don't know who. I don't know when. Exactly. It'll all be worth it when it does happen, especially if it's football. But it's just Oregon. If you're a fan, you feel like, oh man, feel like Oregon's just cursed. Yeah. I don't know how else to explain it right now. How you can have so many teams that are championship caliber in every way and just are not showing up in the postseason. All you can do right now, get back to the drawing board, go set yourself up to make another run at it. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.